Welcome back. President Trump says he's trying to save Iran as the regime brutally cracks down on its own people while its economy collapses. Reports of executions of protesters, mass arrests, and a near total internet blackout keep the citizens over there in the dark. The U.S. blockade on Iranian ports dealing a devastating blow to an economy in free fall.
Can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon, and their economy is crashing. The blockade is incredible. The power of the blockade is incredible. They're not getting any money from oil. And hopefully it can be worked out very soon. Nobody knows what the talks are except myself and a couple of other people. They want to make a deal badly.
Okay, and today is the 60 days since the war began on March 2nd. The deadline would kick in where you have to go to Congress to get approval to extend this conflict, the war powers, but the president and the administration saying, well, there was a ceasefire in April, and so that deadline is going to be pushed outward. And I'm thinking about that in part of the negotiation here and what the administration thinks might happen with respect to whether Congress would give them that approval or not. But the crackdown on the ground is still pretty hard and fast. The economic collapse is happening, but maybe not as fast as some were hoping. So, Marcus, as you sit here on a Friday with oil at $101 a barrel, where do you think we go from here?
Well, I'm very proud of the administration for the ceasefire and not wrecking things or killing people in an effort to try to use economic pressure to resolve the situation. At some point, the choke point has to work. And I've long thought about our country's necessity around the Strait of Hormuz and our ability to actually live without it. And so if you can really change the dynamics there between what we're doing in Venezuela, the relationship with Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. in terms of drilling, can this whole economic shift really be an end result? I don't want to lose sight of one thing, which is we are all committed to ensuring that they don't have nuclear capability. And I know we want to focus on the oil prices, and we should, but I think it's a small price to pay, and I think that payment needs to continue until it's resolved.
All right, the president is confident that the blockade on the Strait is working. And we've talked about, military pressure. We've talked about economic pressure and how they can work in tandem. But ultimately, whether it's for us or Europe or everyone else that uses the Strait of Hormuz, we need a clear passage to be able to go through there. My view is it's taking some time. You've got to secure it. You've got to sweep the mines, Brian, make sure that it's safe. And then ultimately, the United States will say, we decide who is going to come through and who's going to pass here. And Iran, your ships are not allowed to go in or out. But do you think we even get to that point if that takes a few more months, or do you think this internal collapse just happens? Because that's what I think the president is banking on.
Yeah, I mean, I think he wants the internal collapse to happen fast. I don't know if it's going to happen on that time frame. And I agree. And just to be clear, what I want for the Strait of Hormuz is a free international waterway, right? I don't want any toll keepers. I don't think that's the way it should be. I don't think the U.S. should be picking winners and losers. I'm just saying right now we should let good guys go through and the bad guys not go through. Okay, so I'm with you on that. But, you like to talk about 4D chess. Can I tell you something that makes me think about 4D chess, though I don't think it's 4D chess? Venezuela and Venezuelan oil. I think this story is fascinating, okay? If you can think of one guy in the world who knows something about what oil is viable, it'd probably be the guy who runs Exxon, right? What did the guy, Darren Woods, what did the guy who runs Exxon say in January 2026 about Venezuela?
Opportunities?
No. Totally the opposite.
Really?
Uninvestable.
I'm surprised.
Remember, Exxon sat at that table with the president and they said, this is just not for us. It's not going to work. Now, all of these guys are down in Venezuela and they are vying for the chance to pump that oil and process that oil.
Wait,
it is
Darren
remarkable.
Woods said that before the Maduro capture, before the table was reset, correct?
No, this is after Maduro, but it's pre-Iran. And it's pre $105 oil.
Okay.
And so here's my 4D chess point. I don't think the president planned it that way. I don't think he said, I'm going to send oil prices up so I can get these guys excited about Venezuela. But the end result is those high oil prices have got all those naysayers down in Venezuela building this thing. So when we get to the end of it all, I think Venezuela is going to plug way more of the gap that's developed in global oil markets than anybody ever thought. And it is, I don't think it's 4D chess, but if it was, it would be the most brilliant chess move I've ever seen.
Including the distance to travel. It's not just the price of the oil, but it's the
Add
cost
that
of the
on.
supply chain.
Add that
but
on.
it's material.
And it advantages the United States more than ever. It's truly fascinating.
President Trump, Lydia, saying that he said this from the start, but he reiterated on Thursday that he's trying to protect the Iranian people. The regime is still being brutal, carrying out mass executions. The president was able to get some credit for saving some women from being executed, but the internet is blacked out. The currency is in free fall. It's difficult there for civilians right now, and I think the president understands that. But I think there's part of his strategy that also wants the people to have something better come out of this. Are you hopeful that there's an opportunity for that? Because I have been saying this is not a new regime, even though they're calling it one. And I would like to see something a little bit larger than what potentially might be on the table.
I agree with you. I don't think it's a new regime, but I do think it's a fractured one and a weakened one that's been devastated by the leadership. And yes, we do have kind of like the moderate faction, and it's still like this aggressive hardline faction. But I think we also have an Iranian population that is becoming increasingly desperate.
Yeah.
You know, food inflation is through the roof. People can't even put food on their table. Millions of people have lost their jobs. They're wondering how they're going to get through the day-to-day. When you encounter desperation like that, I think you really start asking yourself, why not rebel?
I said that yesterday.
Oh,
Said
did
the
you?
Same thing. I'm glad that you're saying it.
Great
Okay,
minds
I
think
mean,
alike.
well, I didn't. I love watching the show, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to yesterday. So I agree with you sincerely. I just think they're probably starting to ask themselves, why not? What do we have to lose?
Yeah.
And I also think that we have a president and an administration that cares deeply about human life and wants desperately for them to have a better future. You know, there are some kind of factions that ask, how can you expect the Iranian population to do it on their own? They're going to need to be armed. And I think that is a very, that's a debate that is ongoing. But can I just pivot quickly and still talk about, I guess, to add to the 4D chess talk, you know, when you asked Marcus a moment ago about what's coming next, we also have the talks with China coming up in about 2 weeks' time. If they still happen, that is a big, big deal. You know, there's a lot to talk about, but one of the things that I would expect to come up would be a communication from President Trump to Party Leader Xi. You gotta stop supporting Iran. You know, no more shadow fleets, no more teapot refineries. You want access to our technology, you want these NVIDIA chips. It's been approved, but as far as I know, I don't think we've been sending them over in a way that they really want. If they want any chance at that, they've got to stop, and I think that's another layer to this.
One policy note I read this week said maybe this is a chip in China, where like a chip on our table with China, where we say as part of our negotiations, you need to help open up the strait. Maybe not have a presence there, Brian, but if you stop ganging up with Iran and their proxies, we'll deal with you. I don't know, but that could be one bargaining tool that the president has. Let's talk about the president. So he's speaking outside. He's talking about raising tariffs on EU cars and trucks of 25% that we talked about. But he said the Strait of Hormuz will be high on the agenda if it is still closed when Trump goes to China this month. He says we are not satisfied with the latest proposal with Iran. We're negotiating by phone. We're not sure we're going to get a deal. And we're not happy either with Italy or Spain. So we'll have to kind of see how all of this goes. A couple points here, Jackie, if I may. I don't want to minimize what people are feeling at the pump. It's real. But on an inflation-adjusted basis, gas is always around $4. In 1980s, in today's terms, over $5. 1999, it dipped to $2. 2008, it was $5.50 in today's numbers. In 2022, it was $4.50 a gallon. And then this year's current, in today's number is $3.30 a gallon. So I don't want to minimize $4 at the pump, but we've had $4 at the pump four times in the last 30 or 40 years on average in these last decades. So when you put it into that perspective, it's not totally out of control.
Although you make me think a lot about inflation now. That doesn't make me happy either.
I know.
A lot of inflation had to.
Oh, hold on, but
Okay, all
we've
right,
talked
all right.
about, and Jay Powell mentioned this Wednesday, that this will crowd out other disposable income and maybe it will be deflationary. We've talked about that, where it won't be inflationary, because if you cut out other disposable spending, there's demand destruction and prices fall. One quick note, and again, this is on the US versus China. I still think the US is the best house on the block relative to Europe. I think I said China. Sorry, there's a lot going on in my head right now. There were employers some in the US, but some in China, who are saying that we are hiring contractors more than full-time employees because we're worried about the economy. But those are mostly of those contractors based in Europe. I think Europe is in a much different situation than the US is, because we have all the AI CapEx spend. We're doing all of these things that Europe is not doing from an economic standpoint. And so when you hear companies on earnings calls talking about a slowdown in temporary workers because we don't want to commit full time, I looked at the firms that were saying that. 3 out of 4 of them were all based in Europe saying that. Just a food for thought.
Well, and I think that's why the AI piece of Trump's strategy was so important, why he didn't want to let it fall to the wayside like the Biden administration wanted to. He knew that he needed not just some tax cuts and some other things to spur the economy, but that he needed a growth engine, and that AI would be the growth engine. I feel like you want to say something.
I just want to put a cap on the gas prices. You did the adjusted price for today compared to, but the one thing that's important is the per person consumption of gasoline is also lower, and that's not factored into that adjustment. So you have vehicles that are far more efficient today, not playing on the electric piece, but they're far more efficient. That came out of 2008 and 9 when there was a mandate based on 550, and people are traveling less distances. As epicenters and city centers have been built, even in states, they're not driving 25 miles to work or 25 miles. Distances are shorter, vehicles are more efficient.
We gotta go. I'm so sorry, Marcus. All right, coming up, you asked, we're answering. Ask us anything. Our Friday segment is coming up. Stay here.